Bundle. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and welcome to the library. I'm Tennessee Fats, and I'm coming to you from here today because, well, we're shooting a new video. This is the first one in a long time. I tell you guys, life really got in the way for the last couple months. It honestly did. And that was not fun. It really, really was not fun. But we made it through. Today's a snow day. I'm stuck in the Cassadell Fats. I can go nowhere. So today, we're fixing that. Today, we are covering this book. You guys saw the thumbnail way back there. You clicked on it, that's what brought you here. Today we're covering something that's not Robert E. Howard, it's not Conan, it's not even Hyborian Age, but it is beautiful 1990s comic stuff. And as you guys know, I was collecting comics in the 90s. I know it's aging me, but you know, I was. So today we're covering this. Today's video is going to be done this way. First I'm going to talk about, well, what's the Wildstorm universe? Then we're going to talk about this book and the Wildcats. What's in this and how does this compare to the original comics? Last thing here is we're going to talk about what's not in this. That's a really important one that I wish I knew before this got here. Finally, we're going to come back and answer the question of, should you buy it? All right, so without any further ado, let's turn camera around. Let's get into the book. And we never really knew each other anyway. All right. Let's get into broad brushstrokes here and let's talk about, I guess, two things at this point in time. The first one we're going to talk about here is Wildstorm. What is Wildstorm? Then we're going to get into, well, why is this so important to me? Okay, first things first. Wildstorm. What is it? Well, this is an actual publishing imprint that was created by Jim Lee and it was done all the way back in 1992. Now, many of you might not know the history of Image Comics. You might not know how it was founded by the original guys that left Marvel to head over and actually start that shop. Now, it was quite a coup back in the day. And for those of you who were collecting in the 1990s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This was the point in time where basically we got the impression as readers that Marvel just got gutted royally. It's like somebody literally took a knife, jabbed it in that fish, ripped it open, and out came the guts. Not a great picture, and not that great when you were a big fan of a lot of Marvel comics at the time, because all of what was apparently their top talent left. And they didn't just leave, they left and started their own competing company. Now that company was a great one. It was the generation of where you got, well, Youngblood, Wildcats, which we're talking about here, Spawn, you were talking about Gen 13 in there. Gen 13 really blew up. It honestly did. Savage Dragon was in there. There's a lot that came out of that. And a variety of other smaller series that then went back and forth and you saw in all sorts of crossovers. And, well, it was a very exciting time in comics. With the creation of Image Comics, though, what happened was these were basically creator-owner pieces of IP. So if you created it, you owned it. And many of them, from my understanding, if I'm looking at the legalese of this, created their own imprints within Image. Wildstorm was originally called Aegis, and it changed its name when Jim Lee was really getting things together, and he basically took his two top creations, Wildcats and Stormwatch, put them together, you get Wildstorm. So that was basically the name of his imprint. It included, as I mentioned earlier, Wildcats, Stormwatch, another great 1990s series that quite frankly doesn't get any of the attention that it actually deserves. People should be paying more attention to that one. Gen 13, Deathblow is in there. Was Union in there? I think Union was in there as well, which is another really cool piece of IP with a lot of great early Mark Texiera art in it. That was a lot of fun. And that was entirely the imprint. Now, in 1998, that imprint moved over to DC. So this is why you're seeing certain titles within this suddenly coming out under the Wildstorm imprint, but being published by DC. And it went even further after you went through the whole New 52 and you saw the full amalgamation of that universe into the regular DC universe. And I believe at the end of the day, when I was looking into this, I think Wildstorm as an imprint ceased to exist on its own in 2010. I could be wrong in that one, but I think it was somewhere around there. So you can go onto the Google and you look that up yourself. So effectively, Wildstorm is that group of comics. Think of it as just a cluster of comics that share a universe. And that's important because this comes up later, and we're going to talk about that in this video. Now, why is this so important to me? Well, now, this is a particularly important one. We're going to set this one up as a separate chapter. So you guys can skip through this if you don't care why this is important to me. You can go right on into where we start getting into the books. Why is this so important to me? I have a huge vested interest in Wildcats. I was big into buying comics in the 1990s. I don't think I hide that on this channel at all. I know I'm 50, guys. I get it. I get that I'm that old. I get that I threw money away on comics in the early 1990s when, quite frankly put, I probably should have been buying Apple, IBM, you know, real estate, anything else that would have made sense as an investment. But those were the comics, and that's what made me happy then. And honestly, they still make me happy now. So here's where I'm at with Wildcats. Take a look at this image over here. That stack is effectively my entire Wildcats collection. I actually dug them out of the WildC.A.T.S collection down in the basement, brought them upstairs, stacked them here on the desk to actually say, well, how tall is this? How many of these do I own? Now you would say, well, Tennessee Fats, hold on. Did they actually publish that many issues? Well, they did actually publish a lot of issues. There was a lot of Wildcats. It went for quite some time. Writers came, writers left. Artists came, artists left. But the stories kept going. The characters even came and went along the way, some of which very much to the detriment of the comic, which is honestly quite sad. But if you were to say to me, Tennessee Fats, is that entire thing an individual issue of each? No. No, and it's not. Because you see, this is where the Tennessee Fats old man OCD brain kicks in. Because, you know, I may have mentioned this channel before. I have issues with certain issues. Yeah, I know, it sounds stupid, but trust me. What it means is there are certain comic issues that when I see them, I buy them. Not quite sure why, but I do. Death of Superman, Superman number 75. Yep. I have many copies of that. Wildcats number 1 and Wildcats number 2, the Prism version, are both within that. And I'll tell you, if you want to see how many copies of Wildcats number 1 I got, it's right over there. Don't judge too harshly, okay? I buy them. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're not that expensive. So really, let's for a couple cups of coffee, maybe? I don't know. Wildcats number 2? Yeah. I have a few of those too. Now, the stack you're looking at there is actually after I culled the collection. A couple of years back, I actually took a lot of my independent comics and I said, okay, I'm going to keep the core issues and I'm going to let loose everything else. And I did. So my Wildcats collection originally would have been about 2 times the size of that. So I've cut it down, okay? Don't judge too harshly. But when this book came out, though, I saw it on the racks and I thought, well, that's really cool. I didn't say anything at the time because, well, here in the WildC.A.T.S, we have rules right around Christmas time that says that we're all on a shopping moratorium so that we don't buy ourselves gifts that other people might actually be considering getting us. So at Christmas time, this actually showed up under the tree for me. So I was very happy with that, and it gave me a chance to read these. And I know you guys have seen and heard me say this before. There's nothing quite like reading an entire story or an entire run of a comic in one book. It's an entirely different experience than grabbing each individual comic and reading them one at a time. It really is a different thing. So this compendium to me was pretty big. You're taking a 1990s piece of IP that I'm in love with, and quite frankly, what I've forgotten more about than I actually remember, and you're putting it in one book. That's pretty darn cool. Quite happy about that. So this is why, and that's the answer. Why is this so important to me? Why are we doing a video about this? Well, that's the why. All right, let's get into the what now. Let's actually talk about the comic. Now for that part, I think we'll go to the desk. Yeah, let's just sit down at the desk and cover that part. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million. That, by the way, is the Bare Naked Ladies, a fantastic Canadian band, and you should be buying more Canadian. Set that aside. Okay, so what's in this book? Let's talk about that right now. Well, the book is that. That's the front image of this, and its image is actually lifted from Wildcats number 1. Yeah, big surprise. They make a Wildcats compendium, and it's actually lifted from Wildcats number 1. I know, but it's there, and it's got a beautiful satin finish. The book back looks like that, which is a different Wildcats image. But what they've done here is they've taken 2 Wildcats images from very early in the series when, well, I hate to say it, but the art was honestly at its peak. They did fantastic work on this comic way back in the day. Now, I know a lot of people want to really get down on 1990s art because there are a lot of tropes and stereotypes within it, but Jim Lee was not one of the guys that was out there actually doing the majority of that stuff. The stuff he was doing was fairly consistent and remains consistent to this day. It's really well done. So imagery on the front and back is quite nice. The book itself is quite thick. Here's an image of it sitting on the desk. Now, by comparison, that's it sitting on the desk. It's what, about 1.5 inches thick? The stack of actual issues that I showed you guys earlier, well, that's like, I don't know, what, 15 inches tall. It's a ridiculous thing. So getting that into this is actually quite nice. It's a satin finish on it, which feels good on the fingers. It's nice to hold, and because it's not a hardcover, it's actually much more easier to handle. Now, you guys know on this channel, I've done a lot of omnibus review, And I do enjoy my omnibus, and I still buy the hardcover omnibus, and I'm still buying the Conan ones right now to finish out my entire run. But that doesn't mean I'm completely against softcover compendiums or collections. I think softcover ones are actually very nice to read, as long as you don't have some sort of false expectation that this is going to stay in pristine or mint condition for the rest of your life. Who cares? This does quite nicely. The pages themselves on the inside are quite nice. They're a gloss page, which is typical, and it's what you'd expect for something to be produced, well, by DC Comics. DC tends to know what they're doing. And it's kind of interesting seeing a Wildcat or Image comic put out in DC, but, you know, you get over that pretty quick when you read through it and you just ignore that little DC circle down in the corner there. You're just like, okay, whatever, just move on. We're just going to ignore that and keep going. Now, what's really cool about this one, and I think this is an interesting aspect of this, and we really should talk about this, and I've got a couple images of this one, and I'm going to share this one with you as we're going along here. The stories are something that I'm not going to get into too much on this one. There are some really good stories in this one, and honestly, I believe the peak in the writing on this is probably in the Killer Instinct crossover, which happened between Cyberforce and Wildcats, which is a beautiful story. The initial story of how the team forms, also a beautiful story. There's a Chris Claremont story in here. Yeah, that's right, Chris Claremont of the X-Men. He's got a story in here with something that's, well, proprietary and a character of his, which is also really good. But I don't want to spoil any of those. I think if you want to read them, and if you haven't read them, because these have been out of print for so long, this is a great opportunity if you actually want to read these stories. Just go grab them. But story-wise and administration, let's set that aside. What's the actual physical book like? Well, this is interesting. I'm going to share an image with you over here. This is Wildcats, and I believe this is number 5. Hold on. Let me. I don't want to mistake this, so I'm going to make sure that I've got this right. Yes, it is. Wildcats number 5. There's a reason why I'm going to bring this book up here, and this is an important one. Wildcats number 5 has a really neat trick to it, and a really neat twist to it that I hadn't seen anybody else in comic do up until this point in time when it first came out. And honestly, I haven't seen anybody do it since. So I'm just consider, all of you comic producers out there, consider that my glove thrown down. Just try to do what these guys did. I dare you. All right? Wildcats number 5 didn't just have, a gatefoldy thing. No. The Image was just pushing the boundaries at all times of, well, how can we really impress our fans now? They did it here really well. This isn't just some sort of a foldy-outy pagey thing. This is a gatefoldy thing that's just done to the nth degree. Now, I'm going to show you the image of when you first open the book here. And it's in the first 2 pages of this where you really see this giant splash. And there isn't just one, there's 2. This page opens up into this giant splash panel because it and the next page fold out not once, but twice. Take a look at how large this is. I've taken a photo looking down at the desk here, and I've cropped it up as much as I can for you guys. But there's a ruler at the top of this to give you guys a sense of scope. If you really want to, you can pause this and you can zoom in and just take a look. This is a very large image. They didn't just do this at the front of the book, though, because they were already putting in these fancy, long, foldy pages at the front. Why not put them in the back of the book as well? And they did. So this book isn't one where you just get, okay, here's a gatefold in the center. No. These are in the front 2 pages at the front, and the last 2 pages at the back. Here's the splash image that goes with the actual back one. This is a huge fold-out thing. So I've always remembered that particular gatefold to this day. That and one other aspect, which we'll talk to in a minute as well. I was saying to myself, how the hell are they going to include that in here? This is a giant paperback book. Well, this is how they did it. Let me show you another image right here. That's the inside of the compendium. Look familiar? Let's fold it out. That's what it looks like folded out. They actually did it. They put in the foldy-outy compendium thing, the pages in here. Though when you pick this book up and you look at it, you go, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's a book. No. Look really closely down the edge of this one. They're there, and they're inset just a little bit. And it's really cool. They did an excellent job including those. Let me put up the images side by side. I actually took the comic and put it on top of, above the actual fold-out. So you can see the 2 of them right side by side. Now, the comic book is bigger. You can see in the image here, it's physically larger than the actual fold-out in the book. Obviously, there's some things that have to be done when you're putting out a compendium. This is physically smaller than the comic book when you look at the fold-out, which is fine. I get that. I'm okay with that. But the fact that they included that, I think, was absolutely incredible and really, really well done. Now, here's the funny thing though. When I read this, I was completely fine with everything that I saw in here. The image quality looked fine, it looked sharp, and I was looking for this specifically because I just went through a Valiant omnibus where I only noticed well after the fact, actually the image quality in that Valiant reprint was materially degraded compared to the original comics. It was actually material. In this one, I was watching as I was going through, I was like, no, that's sharp, that's crisp, we're good, and I went through the whole thing keeping that in mind. Because I wanted to make sure I could actually comment on that for you guys. When you have the comic though, hold on, let's put the image up with one of those gatefold things again over here. Do you notice a difference between the comic and the book? I'm not going to say it yet. Now, over here, I'm going to put the cover reproduction in the compendium with the book right beside it. Do you notice a difference? There is a difference, and the difference is in contrast and brightness. Really what's happened here is the images that are being reproduced in this compendium, i.e. this thing, are materially duller than the original comics. Now the original comics page quality, I imagine that's a key factor at play here, because when you read the original comics, those pages, they're crisp, they're sharp, they were at the top of their game in 1992 and 1993 when they were making these things. But the DC reprint, I hate to say it, once you actually take the comics side by side, you'll see it. But if you don't care about that and you just read the book and don't have the comics, you'd honestly probably never notice. It's just shame really when you do have the two and you can put them side by side, because now I've got this picture in my head, I'm like, darn it. Again, old man OCD kicking in. Alright, that's the physical book. Honestly, I was really impressed with this thing, and other than that little brightness thing, I don't really have that much that I can slag this thing for. It was really, really well done and well produced. Now we need to talk about something that's weird though. What wasn't included, and what this creates for you as the reader. This is an important one. Lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did. Yeah, lying in bed just like Brian Wilson did. Again, bare naked ladies. It's stuck in my head all week. Okay, let's talk about what's not in here. Now, I didn't want to jump on this one too much in the prior chapters. I also didn't want to, well, really give the whole thing away when we were in the intro. Because, you know, that just kind of really ruins the whole point of watching the rest of the video. Now, most people I know are jumping through these chapters and going straight to the end anyways, because they don't care to listen to an old man rambling. They just want me to get to the point. But for those of you who did, here's the actual Easter egg that's hidden in the middle of the video for you. There's a lot missing in here. Physically, this book is fantastic. I have absolutely no issues with that, other than that little brightness thing. And I'm not really going to jump on that one too hard, because obviously there's something at play here. DC executives didn't just sit down and say to themselves, hey, you know what? Let's make it less sharp. I strongly doubt that. I don't think they did that at all. But here's the thing. When they made this, and this is an interesting aspect, and I think this has something to do with A, copyright. That's an important one. B, cost. And C, the experience for you as the reader. There's a bunch of factors at play here. When you read what's actually included in this one in the back down here, and I'm not going to spoil it for you by telling you what's not. Actually, I am. There's something really important that is missing here, and there's two things that are actually really important here. I shouldn't just say something, there's some things. Number one thing that's missing in here is this. Let me get this out of the bag here so you guys can actually get a clear, you know, forget a clear. It's this. This is Wildcats number 14. Now, I'll tell you, the interesting aspect about this was, it's not here. And there's no reason why, well, there's no explanation in here as to why it's not here. It's just not here. I went down to the Tennessee Fats collection and I said, so what the heck is issue 14? Why is it not here? I said, oh, it's no problem. What I'll do is I'll read through the first 13 issues, go downstairs and get my copy of number 14, read that, and then continue along. There must be some reason why it's not there. Well, I went down to the collection. It wasn't there. Remember at the beginning of this video, when I was talking about why this is so important to me, I mentioned the whole thing where I culled a big piece of my collection at one point in time. I apparently culled number 14. And there's a reason why I culled number 14. It's because it looks like this. This is an issue that was done during something that Image Comics called Image X, or something along those lines. You only really find out why this issue is what it is when you read the written letter in the back of this one by Eric Larson. I'm going to put the image up over here. If any of you are interested in reading that line by line, just pause the video, I guess blow up the screen or somehow so you can actually see this thing. What happened in this particular issue is the guys at Image and I guess this is more so an issue of marketing than anything else, sat down and said, yes, we all own our individual IP, and we're not arguing with that, and we're not trying to impose on one another. But, you know, certain comics are selling more than others. And I actually checked this online. Certain comics were selling more than others. And it was only a snippy comment that Erik Larsen made that actually made me go down this road and check this. Wildcats, when it first started, sold really, really well. If you looked at the images and you looked at what sold, they were going gangbusters. They ended up in some of the top numbers for those years. Spawn, same thing. All of the early Image comics did, but many of the titles rapidly fell off in popularity. I didn't really think about this at the time because I was just a young collector, and well, I wasn't looking at the business of comics. I was looking at the comics of comics. That's what you do when you're a comic collector. You read the comics of comics, not the business of comics. So you never would have known this. Probably explains why at the time when I was at my local comic shop and I was asking them, why aren't you getting this series in anymore? Maybe there just wasn't enough people like me still buying them. And that probably was it. So they decided to make Image X, or whatever the heck they called it. Read the letter, you'll see it. In this, Erik Larsen was voluntold that he would be doing a team story and he would be doing Wildcats, which I don't think he was that happy about. And honestly, I don't blame him. He was happily doing Savage Dragon at that point in time in Freak Force. Freak Force, by the way, is a hilarious comic. Everybody should go out and find as many issues of that as he can. It was quite funny. And then you also had, what was that other guy? Savage Dragon, Freak Force, that Martian guy. Vanguard. He had Vanguard as well. Things that were really tying up his time and making him quite busy. But he had to do this, because this is what they all decided they would do. So this image, issue number 14, is an Erik Larsen story of Wildcats. If you read this as a standalone issue, it has nothing to do with anything. There is no canonical tie-in to anywhere else in the story. None of the other pieces of writing actually build on this. This was a one-off issue where Erik Larsen really was just Erik Larsen. And there are some really Erik Larsen moments in that book. I'm going to share one with you here, and if you know what you're looking for, you know what you're looking for when I say it's an Erik Larsen moment. Yeah, I honestly, Erik Larsen, I love you, guy. Don't get me wrong. I still actually buy Savage Dragon to this day. I'm one of the people who actually still does. I still back you, bud. But on the Wildcats, this was not you, and I understand that this was a whole Image X thing, and we're not going to hold this against you. I still think you did a great job for what you did, but it doesn't build into the Wildcats pantheon. So that, not there. Not there at all. I understand why. I get it. Probably, actually, it's probably, and this is the trademark thing I was mentioning, because the Savage Dragon is in this. He makes an appearance in this, and he's part of solving the problem that gets a little away on things. Actually, Vanguard's in that as well. The Freak Force is in there as well. Yeah, a lot of Erik Larsen type things are in there. I get it. Okay, we're stop right there. He's still producing comics at Image. Probably why this one was not included in a DC compendium. Got it. Moving on. The last thing, though, that's really missing, and this is where things get a little screwed up, and this has to do with some of the writing. So we're going to talk about the writing a little bit here. Remember I mentioned earlier that there are writers that came and went on this series. Alan Moore was in this for a period of time. And honestly, Alan Moore's work, it completely redefined the characters. It completely redefined. It's what Alan Moore does. He goes into an established thing and he completely redefines everything. And if you like that, you like it. If you hate it, you hate it. For me, okay, I was good with it. In this particular, and especially what he did with Supreme. Damn. Okay. Totally different video. We can talk about that later. But writers were coming and going. This Chris Claremont was in here. I mentioned that for a period of time there. Because Jim Lee, unfortunately, after issue number 13, had to step back. He had to step back for, well, on the art and on the writing because he was busy doing all sorts of other things. He had Stormwatch, he had Gen 13, he had all this other stuff and all these things going on all the time. You only have so many hours in the day, right? You can't expect this guy to continue to doing everything. He can't. So he had to step back. So things were going to be starting to hand around. Certain stories started to, well, become insular to the point where they didn't actually build on any prior material. And I think this is probably why you're starting to see those numbers things that I was talking about earlier down. When things don't build, why would you have to buy this issue when you could just pick up the next issue and it probably doesn't even build off of it? There's nothing to motivate sales. When you're trying to sell comics like a soap opera where you have to watch every single episode to understand why that guy was eaten by a whale and then spat out and woke up in Puerto Rico with amnesia, well, if you didn't watch the last episode, you don't know why that happened and why he's been replaced by his evil twin, right? These things happen. I'm not talking about The Bold and Beautiful here, people. Was that actually a plot in the book? You know, I got that from somewhere. We're just going to move on. Pretend I never watched soap operas, okay? Moving on. The stories got a little awry. There was something called Wildstorm Rising that happened in 1995. You guys can Google this yourself and you can look it up. Wildstorm Rising was very complex and it was very confusing. Wildstorm Rising involved every single issue that was within the Wildstorm pantheon. So Deathblow was in there. At this point in time, Grifter got his own series because he had broken off from the Wildcats. The Wildcats, Stormwatch, Gen 13, Union, that was his name. Those were all in there. So they wanted to do a giant crossover, and here's where I'm at on this one. I believe this entire crossover, if I was to read between the lines, the point to this was specifically to revitalize the Stormwatch and Wildcats comics with new characters and with new directions that they were going in. When Chris Claremont came into this, he finished off his series with The Huntsman, which was his IP. And then you had a story that went a little wonky where it was all about the government agency that actually hunts the Wildcats. I don't even know why that was in there. But then you had things start to go a little sideways where you had new Cherubim and what are the Daemonites being introduced. Mr. Majestic was introduced at this point in time. It was a point in time where you had more characters. In fact, Zealot's younger sister was now coming into the actual story. And you step back and go, well, why? Why are we doing this? And I get it. Maybe sales were becoming stagnant, probably for the reason that I mentioned earlier. But Wildstorm Rising was created as this giant crossover event to stop that. At the end of Wildstorm Rising, which happened in Wildstorm Rising number 2, which I'm going to show the image of over here, the original team from the Wildcats were believed to be dead. They're all gone. Except for Grifter, who was still sitting on the earth going, damn, because he figured everybody was dead. So things did change rapidly, and then Wildcats continued with this new team. But then again, the old team turns out that they weren't dead. And it's a whole rabbit hole you can go into. You can read about it online if you want to, feel free. But what happened is, as you get to issue 19 and 20, where this starts to tie into that story, they're just not there. Now, this is the thing where I would say this could easily have just been made 50 pages less. You could have ended this without ever having it drawn in, because stupid people like me, who have to read the whole story because their OCD brain won't let them, are going to go out and have to find all of those stupid issues to find out what happens in between. And that's really, really annoying. Now, I went down to the boxes downstairs. I did find some. But then I said to myself, wait a minute. Remember that gatefold thing you were talking about earlier? If I recollect correctly, doesn't that Wildstorm Rising number 2 have a gatefold thing in it? And it does. And here's an image of that, because you don't need to buy all of them, because the synopsis is right there. It tells you everything that happened up until that point. Now, why that wasn't included in here, I don't know. But effectively what happens is the continuing story of the Wildcats ends at that point. And if you don't pick up these Wildstorm Rising issues, you're probably going to be very lost. You're not going to understand what these last couple of issues are. The last thing that's in here is actually the Stormwatch and Wildcats Team 1 story, which is a prequel story that goes and takes place in the 1960s. And honestly, you could probably just skip those. Just let it go. So yeah, as I say, there are things missing in this. Are they really that important? Issue number 14? No. But as far as that whole Wildstorm Rising thing, yeah, that was kind of important. And I know it might be a trademark issue because, well, Image probably still has a whole bunch of those characters that were in the crossover, maybe, I don't know. But why wouldn't you just include them? She's an angel in a polyester uniform. Okay, so, $1 million question time. Do you need to buy this thing? Well, that's actually a very good question. See, many of you will have skipped prior chapters in this video. And as a result of that, you may not get the whole thing where I talked about what was missing. But, for those of you who just want the Cole's Nose, here's where I'm at. You should buy this. Now, I'm not saying that because I own a stack of these that looks like this. What I'm saying is, because I own a stack of these that look like this, you don't want to. You can just pick this book up, and then you don't have to get a stack that looks like that. Okay? That's a lot of storage. This is just a little book. These characters are very interesting characters, and it's unfortunate that a lot of things that happened in the 1990s are all painted with the same brush. And people make very judgmental statements about a lot of things that happened there because of a lot of the other aspects that were going on in the comics industry at that point in time. The implosion and all the noise that went around that. There's one particular series that was a crossover that I could think of that I'm not going to mention here that people really like to jump on, but we're going to ignore all that. Wildcats as a character team were a phenomenal study in the development of really people into superpowered scenarios. And it's underserviced by reading each individual issue because each individual issue only contains so much story. When you buy the compendium, what you're going to get here is 952 pages of continuous character growth. And it's not character development. You are going to see more of them, but character growth as each new writer comes in and adds another level or another layer to each character as they're going. You really see this when you look at certain authors and their choices on how they're going to develop the interpersonal dynamics between what you know are probably going to be the lovers within this one, which is going to be the Grifter and Zealot, or the Void and Jacob, or the Voodoo and the Hadrian. And many people, if you don't know the Wildcats, aren't even going to know what a Hadrian is. So there's a lot in here where you see these things growing and changing in many different ways, where Voodoo as a character probably changes, I think, 4 times just in the course of these 900 and some odd pages. Really, with her raison d'etre and what her whole driving force is. It's a phenomenal growth. So you should buy this. Now, I did make mention earlier in this video of certain things that are missing. Wildcats number 14, you don't need it. If you want it, I gotta tell you, I bought it. I'm glad I own it. It's not necessary to the overall timeline, the continuum, so you can skip that. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to go buy it just to actually read this compendium. But I will say this, when you get near the latter chapters in this one, you might want to just take a point where you just say, I'm stopping here. If you watched earlier in the video, you know what I'm talking about. But that doesn't actually detract from the value of buying this book at all. I'd still say this is a strong buy recommendation. Well, there you go, everybody. That's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. The lighting has gone up and down as we're dealing with the snowstorm outside in here. So this is going to be an interesting one to actually edit and see how it actually all turns out. Well, everybody, we'll see you in the next video. Soon I discovered this rock thing was true. Jerry Lee Lewis was the devil, and Jesus was an architect, previous to his career as a prophet. That is not the bare naked ladies, in case you're curious. Welcome back to the end of the channel, everybody. Welcome to the crazy Easter egg section that I stick in these videos all the time. You guys didn't think I'd have my first full-length video in God knows how long and actually not include an Easter egg in it, did you? Well, you might have actually, but the bottom line is, surprise, we're here. I wanted to add something to this one. And it's got nothing to do with one of our general Easter eggs where I go off topic. It actually is still talking about the Wildcats. I don't know how DC got away with this one. Honestly. And most people aren't going to watch this Easter egg thing, so you're not going to catch on what I'm saying here. But I am advising y'all right now, if you have a buck, and you're out in a comic shop, and you're out futzing about, and you're saying to yourself, I got an extra buck, and you know what? I got a space at home in a box that would hold a book perfectly. What book should I buy? I would encourage you to pick up Wildcats number 8. Now you might say to me, Tennessee Fats, are you speculating on Wildcats number 8 by any means? Well, no, because I have a stack of these things that looks like this again. I just love showing this image of this ridiculous stack of comics that I own. But that's not the issue here. I didn't want to talk about this in the main video, but I don't really grasp how DC was able to put this out. Because, you know, Marvel's owned by Disney. You know those Disney guys, they got deep lawyers and deep pockets. Wildcats number 8 was pushing the limit a little bit. And I'm going to show you an image because, honestly, I think Jim Lee and Brandon Choi on this one, who are the creators of Wildcats, by the way, we're really having fun in this issue. And this is a nondescript story. It's basically just a two-parter. It's kind of a transitionatory story that takes the characters to a new level of development when a new team comes in and they jump into things. But here's the deal on this one. Take a look at this image. Now, take some time. Read the verbiage that they're going through here. While you're reading through the verbiage, I'm actually going to turn to this page in the book. Hold on. Let's doop-a-doop-a-doo. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Ah, that's the one, yes. Anybody recognize these characters? I'm waiting. Somebody's got to have an opinion. Okay, forget it. I'm going to spoil it for you here. That's Jean Grey and Scott Summers. That's Marvel Girl and Cyclops from the X-Men. They're here talking about mutants, calling one another by name. Well, not really by name. They weren't calling one another by name, but it's clearly evident based on those red glasses. This is Jean Grey, and that is Scott Summers. And they think that Voodoo and Spartan are mutants. This issue is a very interesting one. There's a lot of imagery in here. In fact, I can tell you, I know I'm going to share two images with you. I'm going to put one up over here. Take a look at that one. There's somebody hidden in there. Give it a second. Okay. I'll put up another one over here. Same person, different outfit, hidden in this one. You'll recognize it if you were reading comics in the early 90s. You'll recognize it. That's Wolverine. He's in there twice. Here's another one. That guy down there in the corner, that's the Blob. Jim was having some fun with this one, and he hid a lot of X-Men characters within this in the background. A lot of it takes place in the bar, or it takes place on the cruise line where the story is, well, happening. And as a result of this, you have these X-Men characters that I never understood how Image... I actually thought back in the day, in the 90s, I was convinced that what was happening here was that Image was just being being allowed to just run loose. I said, you know what, Marvel's probably just not coming after. Marvel wasn't owned by Disney back then. Marvel was still on its own, and probably didn't have the pockets to go after them, because you had the comics implosion coming along. But this is now DC republishing this book with all these X-Men characters in it. I don't know if anybody at Marvel's noticed this yet. I hope they don't, honestly, because I've always thought this was a beautiful tongue-in-cheek issue, and I've always thought this is a very fun thing to find in here, and I wanted to share it with you guys, because I don't know how many people notice this. I was actually talking to a comic guy 2 years ago, and we were talking about this book, and I said, no, this has the X-Men in it. He said, no, it doesn't. I said, yeah, it totally does. And we opened it up, and I showed him. I said, that right there, that's Jean Grey, and that's Cyclops, and that's Wolverine. This one, that's the Blob. There's a lot of X-Men characters hidden in this one, as well as Beavis and Butthead. There's a lot of people in this issue. Jim was having a good time, but I don't know. I'm worried now. If Marvel finds out about this, are they going to turn around and suddenly make an issue out of this? Ergo, why this is in an Easter egg at the end of the video and not in the main part where we did the review. Well, I've shared it with you guys. I hope you actually go out and find this book. I hope you go through it and you find other characters that I didn't even notice, because I'm sure there are, because when you look at the actual faces and the way these background characters are drawn, I clearly get the idea that Jim was targeting somebody with every single one of these. So cool. Weird little nuances you find in comics, eh?